In the early months of 1940, as the German war machine swept across Western Europe, Britain found itself standing almost entirely alone. Yet behind the public image of RAF fighters scrambling over the Channel, another, far quieter struggle was beginning. Hidden deep within the Air Ministry's Special Duty Branch, a series of covert missions was quietly approved, operations so secret that many of their flight logs were sealed for nearly 80 years. Among them was Operation Courier Star, a clandestine effort that relied on the extraordinary bravery of pilots flying one of the RAF's most unconventional aircraft, the Westland Lysander. The Lysander was never designed to be a frontline bomber or a dogfighting machine. With its high wings, oversized landing gear, and slow cruising speed, it looked almost outdated before the war even began. But its rugged frame and remarkable short takeoff and landing capabilities made it the perfect aircraft for slipping into the improvised fields and meadows of occupied France. And because these aircraft carried intelligence operatives and resistance liaisons rather than bombs, every mission began not with a briefing on targets, but with discussions about moonlight, wind direction, and the location of hidden farm tracks known only to the French resistance. For the pilots of No. 419 Flight, later reorganized into No. 138 and 161, Special Duties, Squadrons, the struggle began long before their wheels left the grass airstrips of southern England. Their challenge was simple to describe, yet unimaginable to execute. Fly across the Channel at night, descend below treetop height to avoid German radar, locate an unlit landing zone no bigger than a small field, and deliver or recover intelligence agents before the enemy realized an aircraft had ever been there. Even at command briefings, senior officers acknowledged the danger. As one planner noted in a 1940 memo, these missions must be attempted with the understanding that few, if any, will be without fatal consequence. The human strain was overwhelming. Pilots were given only the sketchiest of maps, hand-drawn outlines of fields, roads, and church steeples that would serve as reference points in the moonlit darkness. They flew without escort, without radio communication, and with the constant knowledge that a single German patrol could ambush the landing zone at any moment. No other RAF mission required a pilot to shut down his engine in occupied territory, listen for enemy voices, and then decide if he had the seconds required to get airborne again. And yet, these flights continued, night after night. Historical records reveal that casualty rates among these early missions rose quickly. One Lysander, piloted by Flight Lieutenant Walter Prosser, vanished without a trace in May 1940 after transmitting a short coded signal indicating he had located his landing site near Châteauroux. No wreckage was ever found. Another aircraft, returning from a pickup near Dijon, failed to clear a ridge line and disappeared into the forests of eastern France. For decades, the RAF marked them simply as missing special duties. Only the partial declassification of Special Operations executive files in recent years has allowed historians to piece together fragments of what happened. Yet even in these losses, traces of insight emerge. Agents extracted from France often wrote short, cryptic notes about the experience of hearing the Lysander's approach, a soft mechanical heartbeat in the night, followed by a burst of dust as the aircraft touched the ground. One SOE courier later remarked, "You could not see the aircraft until you were practically upon it." The pilot looked almost ghost-like in the dim cockpit light, but there was no hesitation in his voice. Such personal accounts give modern historians some of the only surviving clues about the pilot's state of mind as they performed missions that officially did not exist. As more details have surfaced, historians have begun questioning a pattern that emerged across several early Courier Star flights, a cluster of unexplained disappearances involving aircraft that should have had adequate fuel, favorable weather, and well-prepared landing sites. While enemy fire and mechanical failures remain the most likely culprits, gaps in the mission logs leave open the possibility that something else, perhaps German counterintelligence, perhaps simple human error, played a role in their fate. Without fully declassified records, the true answers remain elusive. Modern aircrews studying these missions often cite them as examples of extreme decision-making under pressure. The pilot's ability to operate in total darkness, with minimal navigational aids, foreshadowed the precision and nerve required in later special operations aviation. Their courage carved the foundations on which contemporary covert air mobility now stands. But as Operation Courier's star unfolded, so too did its mysteries. Every successful insertion of a resistance leader raised questions about how long German forces would remain unaware of the clandestine air bridge forming across the channel. Each missing aircraft left a silent gap in the record. And behind every sealed Air Ministry folder was the unsettling possibility that the story of the RAF's earliest special duties flights was far more complex and far more dangerous than official accounts have ever fully admitted. The opening chapter of this secret war sets the stage for an even more ambitious series of missions, operations that would push pilots deeper into occupied Europe and ultimately reveal just how far the RAF was willing to go in the shadows of World War II. By the summer of 1941, the tides of war in Western Europe had solidified into an uneasy, deadly rhythm. German forces controlled the continent from Norway to the Pyrenees, and their network of defensive installations grew more sophisticated by the month. Hidden among these was an emerging technology that threatened every Allied aircrew, the Freya and Würzburg radar stations that now dotted the French coastline. Few outside the highest circles of British intelligence understood just how decisive this technology could be. And so, under deep secrecy, the RAF's number 138, Special Duties, Squadron received orders for an operation that would test the limits of covert aviation, Operation Perseus. The hook was simple, but the execution was lethal. The RAF needed to find a way to sabotage or disrupt selected German radar sites before they could lock onto the massive wave of Allied bombers flying night after night into the heart of the Reich. But these sites were protected by barbed wire, machine gun nests, and patrols, and were often placed in open coastal terrain where covert movement was nearly impossible. The traditional bomber approach risked giving away Allied intent. What the Air Ministry wanted instead was silence, a quiet insertion of commandos, explosives, and radio specialists who could destroy or temporarily blind select stations without leaving traces that pointed to British intervention. The struggle began the moment the mission was conceived. Lysanders, Halifaxes, and Whitleys were carefully modified for low-altitude insertion flights, each painted matte black to melt into the darkness. Aircrews trained near Tempsford and Tangmere learned new flight profiles, flying at treetop level, throttled back to reduce engine noise, navigating not by radio beacons, but by the dim outlines of rivers, forest edges, and rural roads glimpsed beneath the moon. The operation demanded absolute discipline. A deviation of even 1 mile could cause a drop team to land near a German barracks or fall into a minefield. A diary entry from squadron leader John Austin captured the human tension behind these missions. "The coastline was a sheet of black glass," he wrote in August 1941. "No fires, no lights, only the distant pulse of German batteries tracking the horizon. We flew so low I could swear I saw the shadows of dunes pass beneath us." Such accounts help modern researchers understand the extraordinary sensory focus required of pilots navigating an unlit terrain while holding steady enough for commandos to parachute safely into their designated zones. Operation Perseus unfolded in stages. The first flights delivered small sabotage teams near Pas-de-Calais and Dieppe, areas thick with German radar installations that watched the channel like unblinking mechanical sentries. For the commandos, landing was only the beginning. Their objective was to plant explosive charges, sometimes just a few kilograms of plastic explosive, on relay equipment or power lines feeding the radar stations. The goal was not to destroy the entire installation, but to create short-term disruptions that German engineers would struggle to diagnose quickly. Yet the missions grew increasingly perilous. German radar crews soon noticed unusual patterns, short outages, unexplained wiring failures, brief fluctuations that could not be attributed to weather. By autumn, the Luftwaffe began tightening patrol routes and doubling the number of sentries near key radar sites. The window for clandestine British efforts narrowed. Then came the disappearances. On the night of September 17, 1941, a Whitley assigned to Perseus failed to return from its drop zone near Berck-sur-Mer. Weather conditions were ideal. Fuel levels had been fully checked. No distress call was ever transmitted. The aircraft simply vanished. When intelligence officers interviewed French resistance contacts weeks later, they found no evidence that the commandos had arrived at their intended landing zone. The RAF quietly listed the aircraft as lost over enemy territory, but internally the incident raised troubling questions. Other anomalies followed. A Halifax conducting a separate supply drop reported unusual ground illumination near Wimerux, faint lights that flickered on and off in irregular patterns. The pilot, Flight Lieutenant Harold Bennett, later noted in his logbook, possibly German signaling. Unclear if decoys or interception attempt. Within minutes of passing the lights, his aircraft was tracked by a fast-moving night fighter, forcing a violent evasive descent to escape. Analysts reviewing the logs decades later found inconsistencies in the reported altitude and radar detection that hinted at a German counterintelligence trap, but the documentation remains inconclusive. These unresolved details are precisely what give Operation Perseus its enduring mystique. The mission was never officially acknowledged during the war, and only fragments of records survived post-war reorganizations. Whether the missing aircraft were intercepted, tricked into landing in hostile territory, or simply lost to navigational error, may never be fully known. Yet the pattern, multiple disappearances clustered around radar installations that the Germans guarded with increasing vigilance, continues to tantalize historians. Modern air warfare specialists studying Perseus often point to its legacy, the fusion of intelligence, sabotage, and precision aviation that would become standard in later special operations. The lessons learned in the dark skies over northern France laid the groundwork for the RAF's evolving doctrine of clandestine air support. But as the failures and disappearances mounted, the Air Ministry realized that the stakes were growing higher. The Germans were adapting. Their radars were becoming more accurate, and British losses were rising in the shadows. What came next, Operation Chalkstream, would push these tensions to a new level, sending RAF crews deeper into occupied Europe than any previous mission had dared. By 1942, the secret war in the skies of Europe took on an even more desperate tone. The German grip over Eastern Europe had tightened, and reports from occupied Poland grew increasingly grim. For the RAF and the British intelligence services, supporting the Polish resistance was not only a moral imperative, it was a strategic necessity. Out of this urgency emerged Operation Chalkstream, one of the most daring and least understood aerial resupply and intelligence missions undertaken during the war. Unlike earlier operations concentrated along the French coast, Chalkstream required flights deep into the heart of occupied territory. For air crews, the risks were extraordinary. For historians, the mysteries surrounding one particular sortie remain unresolved to this day. The hook behind Chalkstream was its ambitious objective, to supply the Polish Home Army with encoded radios, photographic equipment, and encrypted ciphers that would allow them to transmit detailed intelligence on German troop movements, supply depots, and industrial facilities. The RAF assigned these missions primarily to 138, Special Duties, Squadron, and later, to 1586 Flight, an elite Polish unit formed under RAF command and operating from Brindisi, Italy. Their aircraft of choice for long-range clandestine flights was the Hanley Page Halifax, modified for low-level drops with extended fuel tanks and stripped interior fittings. The crews nicknamed them ghost ships for their darkened fuselages and silent approach patterns. The struggle began even before takeoff. Flying to Poland required crews to cross more than 1,000 miles of hostile airspace. Their flight path led over the Alps, across German-controlled Eastern Europe, and into the flat farmlands surrounding Warsaw, territory with almost no terrain features to aid night navigation. Compounding the danger, Luftwaffe night fighter groups had grown significantly more effective by early 1942, aided by advanced radar and well-organized interception grids. A single wrong turn could put a Halifax directly into the path of a waiting Messerschmitt Bf 110. One of the most vivid historical insights into Chalkstream comes from a partially declassified RAF briefing note dated July 1942. It reads, "Deviation from the planned route is unacceptable. Enemy forces are known to triangulate airborne anomalies near the Vistula River. Crews must ensure silent running, minimum altitude of 500 feet upon approach, and immediate ascent following supply release. That final instruction, immediate ascent, was more difficult in practice than on paper. The Halifax was a heavy aircraft, and climbing after a low-level run meant exposing it to searchlights and flak batteries. The night that cemented Chalk Stream's mysterious reputation began like many others: cloud cover over the Tatras, scattered ground mist along the Vistula, and steady weather forecasts from Brindisi. A Polish crewed Halifax, call sign and Nancy, departed shortly after 2100 hours with a standard load for agents, supply canisters, and a package of encrypted material destined for the Home Army's intelligence arm, the Armia Krajowa. The aircraft maintained radio silence, reporting its position only through short-range signal flashes detected from friendly monitoring stations. Somewhere over southern Poland, the crew transmitted a final unencoded message: "Crossing target area, all well." Then nothing. No distress call. No radar echo. No trace on the VHF bands. The aircraft simply vanished. For weeks, no information surfaced. Then a Polish partisan courier reported hearing an engine overhead on the night of the disappearance, followed by a distant thud he believed might have been an explosion. But his position was miles from the aircraft's intended drop zone. Another partisan cell claimed to have seen a German convoy moving through the forests near Radom the following morning, carrying wreckage concealed under tarpaulins. None of these accounts were verified. The reveal came decades later, when fragments from previously sealed RAF investigations were released to historians. The briefing documents contained a single cryptic annotation: possible interception by enemy utilizing new radar under testing near Krakow. This reference to experimental German radar systems raised more questions than answers. Evidence indicates that by mid-1942, the Germans were indeed trialing advanced radar technology in the region, systems capable of detecting low-flying aircraft that previously would have slipped through unnoticed. Yet discrepancies remain. The projected interception radius of the Krakow trial radar did not fully overlap with Chalk Stream's flight corridor, and no German night fighter claims match the date or approximate location of Nancy's last known position. Even today, researchers debate whether the Halifax was intercepted, suffered a mechanical failure, or was shot down by accident during a German field test. The disappearance of Nancy became a rallying point for Polish resistance groups, reinforcing their view that their British allies were risking everything to support them. For the RAF, the loss prompted tactical changes, altered approach routes, revised drop heights, and new radio protocols designed to reduce exposure to potential detection systems. Modern analysts often cite Chalk Stream as a pivotal moment in the evolution of long-range special operations aviation, demonstrating both the possibilities and the limits of clandestine air support. The mystery of the missing Halifax remains unresolved. No crash site has ever been confirmed. No German combat report matches the timeline, and no survivor accounts have surfaced from the forests or villages along its route. Many believe the aircraft lies buried somewhere in the remote countryside, its crew still entombed where they fell. Others suspect German intelligence may have captured remnants of the aircraft or its cargo, burying the incident deep in wartime archives that were destroyed or lost in the final months of the war. As we move deeper into the story, the stakes rise yet again. For Chalk Stream was only one thread in a larger tapestry of shadow warfare, operations that blurred the line between deception, intelligence, and daring aerial maneuver. And the next mission, Operation Taxable, would push this covert warfare into a new dimension, shaping the battlefield itself on the eve of D-Day. By early 1944, as the Allies prepared for the largest amphibious assault in history, the secret war in the skies entered a new and critical phase. The RAF's most clandestine units were no longer simply inserting agents or delivering supplies. They were now shaping the very battlefield on which D-Day would unfold. Among these efforts was Operation Taxable, a deception mission designed to manipulate German radar and convince the defenders of Normandy that an invasion force was heading toward the Seine instead of the real landing zones. It was a plan of extraordinary ambition. A handful of aircraft would create the illusion of a massive naval fleet. Yet beneath the ingenuity and careful planning lay an unexplained disappearance, one that remains one of the most perplexing mysteries of the RAF's Special Duties record. The hook behind Operation Taxable was its audacity. Instead of relying on elaborate troop movements or dummy tanks, Taxable used the radar environment itself as a weapon. The RAF deployed small squadrons of Lancaster and Wellington bombers, each equipped with chaff, thin strips of aluminum foil that, when released in steady intervals, produced false radar echoes. These echoes, if timed correctly, would appear on German screens as a large, slow-moving convoy of ships approaching the French coast. The deception required flawless execution, precise timing, uniform airspeed, and unwavering coordination between aircraft flying in darkness over the stormy channel. The struggle for the aircrews began immediately. Flying straight and level at low altitude for extended periods was counter to every instinct they had developed during years of war. It made them perfect targets for anti-aircraft batteries and night fighters. Worse, the channel weather in June 1944 was unpredictable. Pilots described swirling fog banks, sudden gusts of wind, and waves crashing so high that the sea appeared to glow faintly in the moonlight. It felt, one navigator later recalled, as though we were skimming the surface of a living thing. To enhance the illusion, the crews were instructed to execute complex maneuvers that simulated the spacing and formation patterns of naval vessels. The chaff had to be released at exact intervals every few seconds so that the radar fleet appeared consistent and believable. This required steady nerves and absolute focus. One misstep could create a distortion in the radar signal, alerting German operators that something was amiss. British intelligence later recovered fragments of German radar logs from the night of June 5 to 6, 1944. These logs reveal brief confusion among radar stations near Le Havre and Fécamp, documenting sightings of what operators believed to be between 40 and 50 ships approaching from the north. At 2:45, one radar station reported, "Large formation continuing on steady bearing. No change in speed. Recommend further observation." The deception was working, but then something unexpected occurred. A Pathfinder crew from an RAF Mosquito unit, operating jointly with the Taxable formation to monitor radar effects and confirm German reactions, reported unusual interference shortly after 3:20. Their radio log recorded a terse message, picking up oscillation from inland, not standard Würzburg or Freya, origin uncertain. A second Pathfinder crew flying nearby corroborated the anomaly, noting that the interference appeared strongest near a point along the Seine where German engineers were rumored to be testing upgraded radar arrays. Moments after the second report, one of the Pathfinder aircraft simply vanished from the formation. The aircraft, flown by Flight Lieutenant David Harcourt and Navigator Sergeant Arthur Miles, made no distress call. No radar operator witnessed its descent. And although the aircraft's flight path should have brought it directly back across the channel toward England, it never appeared on coastal radar. The disappearance immediately raised concerns within the RAF. A search was authorized after dawn, but poor weather over the channel limited visibility and no wreckage was located. For decades, historians could not determine whether the aircraft was lost over water, shot down by a concealed anti-aircraft position, or drawn off course by the mysterious radar signals it reported moments before vanishing. Declassified intelligence files released in the early 2000s added another layer to the mystery. A single annotation in a June 1944 summary reads, "Interference may indicate presence of experimental enemy radar. Possible link to Pathfinder loss. Further investigation impractical due to ongoing operations." This brief comment is among the only surviving official references to the incident. The reveal deepens the puzzle. The Germans were known to be experimenting with advanced radar technologies capable of tracking aircraft at lower altitudes and with greater precision. Yet these systems were believed to be in early testing phases and not fully operational. If Harcourt's crew encountered an early prototype, its effect, whether deliberate or accidental, could explain the anomalous signals detected before their disappearance. However, without surviving German documentation, this remains speculation. The legacy of Operation Taxable is clear. It succeeded in its primary goal. German commanders, confused by the radar signatures, delayed reinforcing the true invasion beaches. The deception contributed materially to the success of D-Day. But the loss of the Pathfinder crew remains an open question, a shadow hidden within the larger triumph. Modern historians reflect on Taxable as a pivotal moment when air power, intelligence, and electronic warfare merged into a unified force. The crews who participated demonstrated not only technical skill but the courage to fly predictable, vulnerable paths in the dark for the sake of an illusion that would help change the course of the war. Yet one cannot escape the lingering unease of the incident near the Seine. It raises the same unresolved tension seen across earlier clandestine missions. What exactly did these aircrews encounter in the darkness? And how much more remains buried in sealed wartime archives? As planning shifted from deception to direct reconnaissance, the RAF prepared for its next classified challenge. Operation Olympus would send unarmed aircraft deep over Germany to capture photographic evidence of a secret weapons program, another mission where mystery, risk, and incomplete records combine into a chilling wartime chapter. By late 1944, as the Allied armies pushed deeper into Western Europe, the war entered a new and ominous phase. Intelligence analysts began receiving scattered reports from resistance groups, intercepted communications, and reconnaissance missions suggesting that deep within the heart of Germany, research facilities were working on weapons unlike anything seen before. Some of these claims were exaggerated, others contradictory, but one trend was unmistakable. Something significant was happening in the Harz Mountains. To uncover the truth, the RAF turned to one of its most elite groups, its photo reconnaissance units. Thus began Operation Olympus, a mission as dangerous as it was vital. The aircraft assigned to it had no armor, no guns, and no escort. Their only defense was altitude, speed, and the sheer nerve of the pilots who flew them. The hook behind Olympus lay in the aircraft themselves. The Spitfire PR Mk-11, stripped of weapons and armored plating, was a racing thoroughbred of the sky. Its glossy blue finish helped it blend with the atmosphere at extreme altitude, and its tuned Merlin engine allowed it to climb above 30,000 feet, higher than most German fighters could reliably reach. Equipped with vertical and oblique cameras mounted in the fuselage, the aircraft could capture images of startling clarity. Yet these cameras required the pilot to fly long, steady passes, holding a predictable course for minutes at a time. It was a task that demanded absolute composure, while flying alone over the most heavily defended regions of the Third Reich. The struggle behind Olympus came from the target itself. The Harz Mountains were dotted with camouflaged factory complexes, underground tunnels, and heavily guarded research stations. One of the suspected sites was near Nordhausen, later revealed as the middlework facility where V-2 rockets were assembled using forced labor from the Dora Mittelbau concentration camp. But in 1944, the Allies had only fragments of intelligence, rumors of unusual train traffic, intercepted messages referencing special production, and glimpses of strange shadows on previous reconnaissance prints. To gather clearer evidence, the RAF dispatched its reconnaissance pilots from Benson and Mount Farm in Oxfordshire, as well as from forward airfields in France. These pilots were known for their independence and quiet intensity. They flew without the comfort of a squadron formation and returned with stories of hostile skies that few bomber crews ever experienced. One Flight Lieutenant Peter Holland wrote in his logbook, "Altitude above 30,000. Sky thin as breath. Enemy flak bursting far below like sparks from a distant forge. Camera running. Cannot shake the feeling something is watching back." The diary entry, now held in the Imperial War Museum, provides a rare personal insight into the pressure these aviators faced. The reveal came during a series of Olympus flights in December 1944. Several Spitfire PR aircraft were tasked with photographing a cluster of facilities hidden along the southern slope of the mountains. Resistance reports had noted strange nighttime demolitions, controlled explosions that left debris patterns inconsistent with Allied bombing runs. The RAF wanted proof. One Spitfire, flown by Flight Officer Raymond Knight, captured a sequence of images showing partially collapsed tunnel entrances, scorched concrete shielding, and what analysts later interpreted as machinery hastily removed or destroyed. The destruction raised immediate questions. Were the Germans attempting to conceal evidence of advanced weapons development before it could be captured? Or was the site damaged by an internal accident? Yet it was another Olympus flight, launched 2 days later, that introduced the mission's central mystery. On a crisp winter morning, a Spitfire piloted by Squadron Leader Malcolm Rhodes took off from a forward base in Belgium. His orders were precise. Perform 3 photographic passes over the Nordhausen sector, climb to maximum altitude, and return along a route that skirted the Ruhr. Rhodes was experienced, more than 70 reconnaissance sorties, known for his calm demeanor and methodical flying style. The weather was clear, visibility excellent. At 9:47, Rhodes radioed a brief status report, beginning 3rd pass. Conditions good. It was the last transmission he ever made. Minutes later, ground control attempted to raise him. No response. Allied radar stations reported no sign of his aircraft returning westward. Later analysis showed that no German fighter claims matched his flight path. And though German anti-aircraft units around the Harz were active that morning, no recorded impact or detonation corresponds to the approximate time of Rhodes's disappearance. The RAF conducted a limited search, but winter weather and ongoing operations prevented a full investigation. Rhodes's aircraft was listed as missing, presumed lost. For decades, the absence of wreckage or German documentation puzzled researchers. Some speculated mechanical failure at extreme altitude. Others suggested interception by a high-altitude Mi-262 jet, though its operational range that early in the war makes this unlikely. The modern application of these missions is clear. Operation Olympus represents the birth of what we now call strategic reconnaissance, gathering intelligence not through raids or captured documents, but through imagery that reveals an enemy's intentions as much as its capabilities. The pilots who flew these missions did so with no support and no margin for error. Their photographs helped shape Allied understanding of the German V-weapons program and informed post-war investigations into Nazi research facilities. Yet the mystery of Rhodes's final flight continues to linger. No aircraft parts have ever been recovered from the Harz region that match his Spitfire. Local archives in Germany record no crash that fits the profile. The gaps in the record mirror the unexplained anomalies observed in earlier clandestine missions, an unsettling pattern of disappearances in operations where the stakes were highest and the evidence remains incomplete. As the war drew to a close, these unanswered questions accumulated in sealed files and forgotten reports. And in the war's final months, as secrecy mixed with urgency, the RAF undertook one last wave of shadow missions whose incomplete logs, missing air crews, and ambiguous intelligence would shape the enduring mysteries examined in Part 6. As the final months of World War II unfolded, the skies over Europe remained as dangerous and uncertain as ever. Germany was collapsing, yet paradoxically, the chaos made secret operations more complex, not less. The RAF's special duty squadrons, reconnaissance units, and intelligence branches were suddenly confronted with an overwhelming surge of last-minute missions: recover missing agents, document destroyed research sites, intercept fleeing enemy scientists, and extract what intelligence remained before it vanished into the ruins of the Reich. It was during these feverish months, between January and May of 1945, that gaps in the historical record grew wider, not narrower. Missions were launched on incomplete intelligence, flight logs were scribbled on scraps of paper, and entire sorties vanished between collapsing front lines. The result: a final chapter defined by remarkable successes, profound sacrifices, and mysteries that linger to the present day. The hook behind these late-war missions stems from a simple but chilling reality. As German command structures broke down, so did their record-keeping. Facilities were abandoned, destroyed, or overrun by Soviet forces before the Allies could reach them. High-value research programs were evacuated deeper into the mountains or buried in tunnels and mines. Resistance groups reported sudden demolitions of factory complexes, unexplained train movements in the night, and German convoys carrying crates marked with scientific designations rather than military ones. The RAF needed clarity, and fast. Their solution was to intensify aerial reconnaissance and special duties flights across central Germany, even as enemy anti-aircraft units made desperate last stands. The struggle for RAF crews was not merely physical, it was emotional. Many pilots who had survived years of combat now found themselves facing unfamiliar risks, friendly fire accidents, shifting front lines, and the unpredictability of a defeated but not yet surrendered enemy. One surviving intelligence officer from 161 Squadron later described the atmosphere as a fog of urgency, no time for proper planning, no understanding of what lay ahead. Missions that would once have required a week of preparation were launched within hours, based on vague reports from advancing Allied divisions or fragmentary intercepts from German communications. A diary entry from March 1945, written by Flight Lieutenant Jeffrey Alden of No. 544 Squadron, gives a rare glimpse into the mindset of these aircrews. "The war feels like a machine running faster than its own gears," he wrote. "Every day a new directive, a new target, a new rumor of weapons or documents or missing men. And always the question, what else is hidden out there before the collapse finally swallows it all?" Alden's reflection captures a truth historians often emphasize: the closer the Allies came to victory, the more shadows they discovered. It is during this period that the reveal of several lingering mysteries becomes most apparent. Among the most perplexing is the case of two reconnaissance aircraft lost within days of each other in April 1945, both assigned to photograph suspected weapons research sites near the Harz and Thuringian Forest. The first, a Spitfire PR Mk-11 piloted by Warrant Officer Colin Mercer, vanished after radioing that he had spotted movement near the southern ridge, possible convoy. The second, a Mosquito from 540 Squadron, disappeared while attempting to track unusual smoke plumes emerging from a cluster of factory ruins. Post-war investigations found no matching German anti-aircraft reports, no crash sites, and no prisoner records. The official documents list both aircraft under a single phrase: missing, last known operating in unstable region. What complicates these disappearances is the subsequent discovery, decades later, of partially destroyed German research archives describing emergency evacuations from underground facilities in the same regions. Historians continue to debate whether these RAF aircraft stumbled upon convoys attempting to relocate sensitive materials or simply fell victim to the confusion and volatility of Germany's last military formations. Neither possibility can be proven, and the lack of physical evidence leaves the incidents shrouded in uncertainty. The modern application of studying these missions lies not in uncovering conspiracy, but in recognizing the complexity of intelligence operations under collapsing wartime conditions. The RAF's experience illustrates how quickly clarity gives way to ambiguity when record-keeping breaks down and frontline conditions shift by the hour. Modern air forces still examine these missions when training reconnaissance crews. Lessons about improvisation, risk assessment, and the limits of intelligence in rapidly changing environments. As the war ended, many of the incomplete logs, unexplained disappearances, and sealed intelligence files became casualties of the post-war administrative purge. Some were archived without proper indexing. Others were destroyed as their contents were deemed outdated or politically sensitive. Only in recent decades have historians begun stitching together the fragments, interviews, aerial photographs, declassified intelligence summaries, to piece together the shadowed history of these final RAF operations. The close of World War II brought victory, but not closure. The lingering mysteries, from vanished reconnaissance flights to unconfirmed radar experiments, from disrupted sabotage missions to incomplete agent extractions, remain part of the deeper, lesser-known narrative of the air war. They remind us that even in a conflict defined by unprecedented documentation, some stories slipped through the cracks of history. These 5 classified RAF operations, finally emerging from decades of sealed archives, form only part of the vast mosaic of WWII's hidden battles. Their secrets challenge us to look beyond official records and to appreciate the courage of the aircrews who ventured into the unknown, often with no witnesses and no return, shaping the war from the shadows and leaving behind questions that may never be fully answered.